The old sports car sat beneath the bright auction hall lights, its faded green paint buried under years of dust and scratches. Rust traced the edges of the body, and the cracked leather seats looked beyond repair. Most people walked past it without giving it a second glance. Some whispered that it should have been sent to a scrapyard instead of an auction. Others laughed, convinced it was taking up valuable space that could have been used for something worth selling. Daniel Harper, a 38-year-old single father, stood quietly beside the car. He wasn't a collector or a wealthy investor. During the day, he worked as an auto mechanic, and every evening he hurried home to his 10-year-old daughter, Lily. Since losing his wife 5 years earlier, life had become a constant struggle. Every dollar mattered, and dreams were usually replaced by overdue bills. Still, Daniel had never stopped believing that hard work and patience could change a person's future. Across the showroom, billionaire businessman Victor Langley examined the neglected vehicle with an amused smile. Surrounded by reporters, collectors, and industry experts, he casually remarked, "That car is worthless. Even the cleaning crew wouldn't waste their time bidding on it." Laughter echoed through the room. Cameras captured every reaction as people nodded in agreement. To them, Victor's opinion was as valuable as gold. If he called something worthless, few dared to disagree. Daniel remained silent. Instead of focusing on the rust or broken headlights, he noticed the handcrafted aluminum body, the unusual racing vents, and several tiny details that reminded him of classic European race cars from decades ago. Something about the vehicle didn't seem ordinary. When the crowd moved on to admire expensive luxury cars, Daniel stayed behind. He carefully brushed away dirt from a small metal identification plate hidden near the engine compartment. The faded numbers were almost impossible to read, but they sparked a feeling he couldn't explain. He wasn't certain what he had discovered, but for the first time in years, he felt that life might be placing an unexpected opportunity directly in front of him. Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the forgotten car. While the auction continued, he asked one of the staff members if he could take a closer look before the bidding began. The employee shrugged and handed him a pair of gloves. "Be my guest," he said. "No one else seems interested." Daniel slowly opened the heavy hood. Dust covered almost everything, but underneath the grime he noticed something unusual. The engine wasn't original. It had been carefully modified decades earlier using high-quality racing components. Whoever had worked on it knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't the work of an ordinary mechanic. He wiped away more dirt and found a tiny metal plaque attached to the firewall. Most of the engraving had faded, but a few letters and numbers remained visible. They matched the production style of a rare European racing manufacturer from the late 1950s. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. He had spent countless evenings reading old restoration books with his father when he was a teenager. Those memories suddenly came rushing back. Still, he refused to let excitement cloud his judgment. A rare badge alone meant nothing. The car could still be a worthless replica or a heavily altered project. He pulled out his phone and searched old racing records, comparing the chassis markings with photographs from classic motorsport archives. The similarities were remarkable, but he needed proof. Just then, the auctioneer announced that the neglected car would be sold next. The room barely paid attention. A few people laughed, expecting the lot to be skipped altogether. Victor Langley leaned back in his chair with a confident grin. "Someone might buy it for decoration," he joked. "Nothing more." Daniel looked at the car one more time. Every instinct he had developed from years of repairing damaged vehicles told him there was a story hidden beneath the rust. He wasn't gambling on luck. He was trusting knowledge, patience, and the lessons his father had taught him long ago. When the bidding opened, the hall remained almost silent. Daniel slowly raised his bidding paddle, knowing this single decision could either become the biggest mistake of his life or the opportunity he had been waiting for. For the next 7 days, Daniel spent every spare hour studying the forgotten race car. He couldn't afford an expensive restoration, so he focused on preserving it exactly as it was. After finishing long shifts at the repair shop, he drove to a friend's small garage, where they carefully removed decades of dust, grease, and dirt without damaging the original parts. The more they cleaned, the more unusual details appeared. Beneath the faded green paint, they uncovered traces of an old racing number that had been painted over many years earlier. Inside the engine bay, Daniel noticed handcrafted welds and lightweight aluminum panels that weren't typical of ordinary production cars. It was clear that this vehicle had been built with a special purpose. One evening, while cleaning the driver's side footwell, Daniel discovered a small metal plate hidden beneath layers of hardened grease. The stamped chassis number was still readable. He photographed it from every angle and emailed the pictures to several respected classic car historians and restoration experts. Most replied cautiously, saying the numbers looked promising but needed further verification. Then, 2 days later, Daniel received a phone call from one of the experts. "I don't want to raise your hopes too soon," the man said, "but this chassis number matches records of a factory-built prototype race car that disappeared decades ago. If every detail checks out, you've found something collectors have been searching for years." Daniel thanked him but refused to celebrate. He wanted facts, not excitement. He gathered old maintenance records that had been left inside the glove compartment and arranged for independent specialists to inspect the vehicle. After a thorough examination, they confirmed that the car retained most of its original components and had an authentic racing history. News spread quickly through the collector community. The same people who had ignored the dusty car were suddenly asking about private offers. Daniel politely declined every one of them. He believed the car deserved to be presented openly at a major international auction, where its true history and true value would finally be recognized. The auction hall was filled long before the first bid was announced. Collectors, museum representatives, and investors had traveled from different countries after hearing about the rediscovered race car. Unlike the first auction, where it had been ignored in a dusty corner, the vehicle now stood under bright lights with its documented history displayed beside it. Every scratch and worn panel had become part of its remarkable story rather than something to hide. Daniel stood quietly near the stage, wearing the same simple suit he had owned for years. He wasn't thinking about becoming rich. He was thinking about Lily, who sat in the front row holding the small notebook where she used to draw pictures of the future home they dreamed of owning together. When the auctioneer opened the bidding, offers climbed rapidly. $1 million became 2, then 4. The room grew silent except for the voices of competing bidders. Daniel could hardly believe what he was hearing. The forgotten car that everyone had mocked only a week earlier had become the most talked-about vehicle of the event. The final bid came from an international collector. $8 million. The gavel struck. Sold? For a brief moment, the room was completely silent before breaking into loud applause. Reporters rushed toward Daniel, eager to hear how an ordinary mechanic had discovered such an extraordinary treasure. Among the crowd stood Victor Langley. The billionaire who had publicly called the car worthless slowly walked over and extended his hand. "I judged it by its appearance," he admitted. "You saw something the rest of us missed." Daniel shook his hand with a smile. "My father always told me that real value isn't always visible at first glance. Sometimes it takes patience, knowledge, and faith to recognize it." The money changed Daniel's life, but it never changed his character. He paid off every debt, secured Lily's education, opened his own restoration workshop, and helped young mechanics learn the trade. His story became a reminder that success doesn't always belong to the richest person in the room. It often belongs to the one who refuses to overlook hidden potential, whether in an old car or in themselves.